Hi, my name is Sonia Shah, and I am a psychology major on a pre-physician assistant track, and I live in Ashburn, Virginia. Today, my group and I will be talking about Dorothy Height, and more specifically, her impact on women's rights and African American civil rights. She was fortunate enough to watch the change that she had initiated happen since she was born in the early 1900s and lived all the way till the 2000s. Throughout our final presentation, you will see just how much of an impact she had. Now let's dive into the structure of our presentation. So first, what we're going to talk about is the bibliographical sketch. And this is going to include her personal life, her education, her upbringing, different organizations that she was part of, and anything kind of leading up to who she is now, or was. And then we're going to talk about how her life and her work connects to our class and what we've been talking about all of this semester with lectures and videos and articles. And then third, we're going to talk about her historical importance. And lastly, we will close off by talking about how this individual, Dorothy Height, really furthered our understanding of topics in class. So first we're going to talk about the bibliographical sketch, and I will be highlighting the very first part of it. So this will include the upbringing, her personal life, and her education. So now let's address the upbringing of Dorothy Height. Dorothy Height was born in Richmond, Virginia, March 24th, 1912. Now, her parents, James Height, was a building contractor, and her mother, Fanine Height, was a nurse. So this kind of caused her to move around a lot because of her parents' occupation. When she was about the age of 4, she ended up moving to Rankin, Pennsylvania because her parents' occupations took her there. So growing up, Dorothy Height actually had severe asthma and was not even expected to live past the age of 16. But here we see her at the age of 4, and then we see her living all the way until the 2000s. So by the age of 4, she moved with her family to Rankin, Pennsylvania, where she attended racially integrated schools. She was quite studious after moving to Rankin, Pennsylvania, and delving into the educational aspect of her life. Height attended Rankin High School, and where she found her passion for public speaking, especially in social and political areas, which she found to be more active in her life. With public speaking skills and the drive to campaign for issues that was important to her, like anti-lynching, she competed in a national oratory competition. After winning this competition, she actually was awarded a $1,000 scholarship to college, which Elks had sponsored for her. Now, let's talk about education. So she had an interesting ride with education. First, she ended up wanting to go to Barnard College. She applied and got accepted, but then they told her that she couldn't come because they had already enough Black individual students, and they had met their Black quota already. So this did not make her want to give up on her dream of wanting to go to college, so she actually did apply to another place. So she applied to New York University. So she studied at New York University. She got accepted and ended up studying at New York University. She graduated with a bachelor's in 1930s. Then she graduated with a master's in 1932. And her master's was in educational psychology. Now with this master's, she was able to land her first job as a social worker in Harlem, So now with everything that I've talked about with her upbringing and her education, let's talk a little bit about her personal life in perspective with our class. So actually on April 15th, just a few weeks ago, we had a discussion on a chapter that we read. Now that chapter was Llewellyn, chapter 11. And we basically addressed how the ideal post-war lady was a female who was married, had children, and didn't even partake in political matters. And now, as you can see from what I've been saying in the last few slides, was Dorothy Height kind of like this? And your answer should be no. Dorothy Height was not married, she had no children, and she obviously was a political activist with extreme passion in social and political aspects of her life. So Dorothy Height was not a conventional female back then. She was basically the opposite of a typical lady that was illustrated in chapter 11. And she was a pretty influential female politician.
Hi, my name is Madison Beck, and I am a chemistry biology double major here at JMU, and I am also a local from the Harrisonburg community. Today I will be talking with you all about the professional life of Dr. Dorothy Height. So, Dorothy from a young age participated in giving back to her community. Before she was fully entrenched within politics and advocacy, she was an active volunteer for her local Young Men's Christian Association, also known as the YMCA. Another prominent organization Dr. Height worked with included the National Council of Negro Women, also known as the NCNW, of which she was the president for 40 years. Coming to be the leader of the NCNW in 1957, Height was able to play a prominent role in the civil rights movement of the 20th century. Not only was she instrumental in the planning of the March on Washington in 1963, but she was also a revolutionary voice to the movement. Height took great care in articulating and raising awareness about the importance of political engagement as well as the links between sexism and racism. In addition to fighting against racial and sex-based discrimination, Height worked to challenge the inequities within the criminal justice system as well as eradicating the practice of lynchings. Other committees that Height worked on included the President's Committee on the Employment of the Handicapped, the Presidential Commission on the Status of Women, and the National Council for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. Dorothy's work, spanning decades of tireless effort, truly acknowledged that inequities anywhere meant inequities everywhere. A more in-depth look at some of Height's stances are present in some of her writings, namely The Core of America's Race Problem, provides readers with a general outline of her political stances. Published in 1945, Height opens her work with a quote from Gregory of Lastos, calling into question how America wishes to view itself and its race issues internally, while the nation was engaged in a world war whose opposing nations based their philosophies upon the idea of a racial hierarchy. The Core of America's Race Problem continues in addressing the systematic racism of the United States through observing the various institutions and portions of infrastructure that enable and uphold racial inequality. Such institutions included, but were not exclusive to, housing, the available job market, and the healthcare system. In addition to touching in the core of America's race problem, Height's participation in the National Council for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research helped to raise awareness on the abuse that African Americans face within the medical community. During her time on the council, the organization published the Belmont Report, a response to the Tuskegee syphilis study. This is significant in that the study, for decades, abused Black men by inducing cases of syphilis in otherwise healthy individuals. Additionally, despite the existence and well-known use of antibiotics as treatment, those involved in the study were not properly treated and were prohibited from seeking external medical assistance. Such blatant abuse not only negatively affected those in the study, but also hurt the surrounding community, as the patients unknowingly spread the infection to their partners. In an interview concerning the report as well as other portions of her work, Height states that, quote, "The Belmont Report is very clear about the respect for human personality," end quote, a concept that underscored all of Dr. Height's work.
Hello, my name is Mari Butts. I am a computer science major and I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia. Today I will be discussing how the life and work of Dorothy Height connects to our class, with my first topic being African American women's impact in the major organized movements of her time, like the March on Washington. Though the men were represented and credited for the success of these movements, an article by Civil and Human Rights.org best put it by saying, "The roles of women were instrumental in the movement's successes." Looking into Height's role in the march, it was clear she helped quite a bit by assisting in raising funds for the march and allowing the NCNW headquarters to be a meeting place in Washington. And even though she unfortunately wasn't able to speak during the march, she was actually able to persuade them to allow Martin Luther King Jr. to speak at the end of the program. In addition, she made a historical statement as being the only woman on the platform behind the speakers. To see how the topic relates to our class, it is vital to take a look into Anna Arnold Hedgeman, who was discussed in the Scan Law in Chapter 10 reading for an impact in the March on Washington. She too played a role in the organization of this event, as on page 158 it says, she was in charge of getting involved in the march's leadership and getting white people, particularly Protestants, to participate. And though her influence wasn't recognized by the public, her hard work and dedication was respected by those involved in the march. Another important aspect of Dorothy Height's work that ties into the concepts we have discussed in class is her role in fighting for equal rights for women. This started with her involvement in the previously stated YWCA, where she advocated for improved conditions for Black domestic workers. With her next incredible position being the fourth president of the NCNW, she began to focus more on the civil rights struggles of 1960. These included educating the South about voter registration, voter education in the North, and organizing scholarship programs for the student civil rights workers. Another issue was seen in Linda Gordon's journal article, as she said there was presence of segregation between white and Black women national network reformers. She also went on to outline the implication of this on page 564 of her article, as it caused Black women to almost always be excluded from meetings they without a doubt should have been attending. So, to combat this, women like Height became a voice of hope for these women and the African American community as a whole. The previously mentioned Anna Hedgeman was also a Black female leader during the civil rights movement. With her being a part of the YWCA organization, she spent much of her early days as an advocate for bridging the gap between Black and white women. An example of this is seen on page 152 of the Scan Volume Chapter 10 readings. In her attempt to convince white Protestant women that segregation contradicts God's law. In all, the strength and resilience both women displayed during their lifetime gave them the recognition that they hold today and showed what's possible with hard work and dedication.
Hello, my name is Sam Game, and I am a first-year International Affairs major with minors in honors, political communication, and theater. I'm going to continue the conversation about our connection from Dorothy Height to our class, so let's get into it. So in addition to her work in political activism and fighting for women's equality, Dorothy Height also works tirelessly in her campaign to promote job equality under the, among the African American women in the United States. She was one of the chief organizers for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, which was the most important march in recent history for equality that America has faced. So akin to the previously mentioned Anna Arnold Hedgeman, which Samari mentioned, Height worked to promote job equality in working on this historical event. Hedgeman worked closely with Height, which is where we see, a strong connection between our class and Dorothy Height's story. While it has been mentioned that this march was influential in social change, it was also very influential in economic and labor changes. This act, which is cited as a labor law, outlawed the discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, etc., which all of you guys know, and it opened up new opportunities for Black Americans when it came to work. So as previously mentioned, however, there was some irony in Dorothy Height and other women working on the promotion of this act. And I know you're wondering, what is the irony in this? Even though the law was to prevent discrimination, the women who worked on this campaign and campaigned for it and worked on this act, they were not treated the same way as the men back then or in recent modern history. They are not remembered the exact same way. So to this day, the women who worked on their campaign are not spoken about in the way of MLK or John Lewis or Malcolm X. We don't hear about them as much. In the presentation titled Rethinking the Leadership of the March on Washington, which was a class presentation, we talked about this very thing. The intersectional identity of both being Black and being a woman in our society is extremely overlooked. Our country has been built by the hands of Black women. Ultimately, I think that the importance of all of the readings, the lectures, the discussions in this class is that, we need to become more aware of this. So this kind of brings me to my, center point that Dorothy Height connects to everything that we've done in this class. You know, she connects to all of the readings, all of the lectures, all of the discussions, all of, you know, the books, everything that we have done in this class has to do with her and other women like her. Because the entire point of us even having this class, I believe, is for awareness. Just, you know, to be able to see like, oh, these women were so influential and so important, and we don't talk about them. So in doing that, in hearing about Dorothy's story and the other women that we are talking about today, we are able to appreciate a group of people that are so underappreciated in our society. And I think that really is the most important connection to this class.
Hi, my name is Amber Oliver, and I am a computer science major from Loudoun County, Virginia. I'm going to speak on the historical importance of Dorothy Heights. Unfortunately, because the textbooks do not teach us, I did not know the story behind many of these women, so I had to rely on my group members to make a collective decision about whose story we wanted to research and learn more about. Height began working with the National Council of Negro Women, the NCNW, in 1937 after she was inspired by African American leader Mary McLeod Bethune. 20 years later, in 1957, Height became the fourth president to lead the NCNW. One of Height's main focuses during her time in the NCNW was to stop the lynching of African Americans and to restructure the American criminal justice system so that it would no longer target African Americans. Height's focus is especially important today because of the disturbingly large number of African Americans who have been killed by police officers. Many of these incidents are occurring during routine traffic tickets that spiral out of control, and it ends in a man or woman's life being taken away. Heights fought the injustice of her time by organizing anti-lynching protests and utilizing her voice to speak out about the unfair criminal justice system. Dorothy's methods have been mimicked today as we have seen organizations such as Black Lives Matter lead substantial protests that sought to fight the current injustice occurring between police officers and Black Americans. Her anti-lynching and criminal justice efforts have helped pave a path for all individuals, especially African Americans, to have the courage to speak out against the United States government, specifically our justice system, when they see an injustice occurring. Here in the middle is a photo of many women at NCNW with Dorothy Heights on the far right of the photo. Dorothy was such a prominent leader in the civil rights movement that political leaders such as Eleanor Roosevelt, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Lyndon B. Johnson would often seek her counsel on political issues. This was a huge leap for African Americans, and specifically African American women, because during this time, not many African Americans were part of politics, and when they were, it was going to be a man most of the time. In addition to that, Heights was one of the head organizers of the March on Washington, and more amazingly, she represented the only women's organization within the entire march. Due to her civil rights and activism and the lasting impact she had, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1994, as well as the Congressional Gold Medal in 2004. Her efforts have historically demonstrated the power that women hold within their minds and their voices. She is a staple that has been looked up to by millions of women over the years and can continue to be a representation of the political power women should continue to strive to hold. She exemplifies to all women, particularly African Americans, that not just men can be part of the political world, but women can have a lasting effect on politics of all kinds. We can see the lasting effects here in this PowerPoint. There's a video of President Obama speaking on Dorothy Heights after she passed away. This alone shows the phenomenal historical importance that she had, as she is honored by the President of the United States. Not only that, but earlier in the video, in a part that I'm not going to show, President Obama discusses how Dorothy visited the White House 21 times during her presidency, meaning that even when she was in her 90s, she still had a huge impact on the American politics and especially civil rights movements.
They are leaders whose legacies we teach. They are giants who fill our history books. Well, Dr. Dorothy Height deserves a place in this pantheon. She too deserves a place in our history books. She too deserves a place of honor in America's memory. Look at her body of work. Desegregating the YWCA, laying the groundwork for integration on Wednesdays in Mississippi, lending pigs to poor farmers as a sustainable source of income, strategizing with civil rights leaders, holding her own, the only woman in the room, Queen Esther, to this Moses generation, even as she led the National Council of Negro Women.
Hi, my name is Llewellyn. I am from Baltimore, Maryland, and I am a communication sciences and disorders major. I will be covering our last section of our presentation of Dorothy Height, in which we're answering the question, how did this individual further our understanding of the topics discussed in class? But I wanted to first start out with why I was personally interested in choosing Dorothy for our project. And this was mostly because I didn't know much about her beforehand, like most of the women that we could choose from, but I had heard her name before, so she was most easily recognizable, but I didn't know much of her achievements or her impact in African American women's history before this project. And I was just genuinely interested in learning more about a woman who has such a significant and more recent impact in this community, and how she benefited them more recently in the last couple of years. So I will be discussing next some of the assumptions and things that my group and I learned after completing our project and our research, and how Dorothy's life and achievements connect to this class, this whole semester, and the final reflection of Dorothy. Now I'm going to touch on some assumptions that we had and I personally took out of this assignment. So before this project, I assumed that Dorothy Height was a women's rights activist who fought for equal rights and equal opportunities for African American women. I made this assumption since activism and speaking out for and about African American women and their treatment is a primary theme of our class and what we discuss in lecture, our breakout rooms, and the basis of all of our projects this semester. And I learned that Dorothy brought up many of the struggles that she and other African American women faced during this time, when she was president of the National Congress of Negro Women, the NCNW, and the Young Women's Christian Association, the YWCA. But she helped the NCNW win grants to provide vocational training and assistance for women wanting to open businesses, and her participation in these organizations led to her advocacy of improved conditions for Black domestic workers and equal rights in the workforce, which just helps support our assumptions that she fought for equal rights for all African Americans and not just women, but her main focus was for African American women, and that she joined organizations to help promote these ideas and her desire for equal opportunities and advocacy for these women. After researching Dorothy Height, I was left with a better understanding of her achievements and the vital role she played in African American women's history in the United States. Her activism and passion helped improve the circumstances and opportunities for African American women, especially in the labor force, which was paving the way for women to continue speaking out and claiming their independence as a community. So as previously mentioned, I had not heard much about Dorothy Height or her impact before this project, but her influence in the civil rights movement helped me become better educated and aware of the constant battle that African American women's against their inequalities, which we've discussed all semester. We can even see these inequalities in the entire Black community with the Black Lives Matter movement and their fight for justice. So it just shows how prevalent all these issues are today and what she was fighting for. But I connected her work and achievements towards many of the themes that we discussed in class, from the very beginning of history in African American women being enslaved to the movement towards gaining equality, which is still being fought today, and equal opportunities in the workforce. So, for example, my group read for our discussion To Joy My Freedom, which describes the account of Black women in labor during the postbellum era, so after the emancipation. These women in the book face similar issues that Dorothy fought for concerning current issues that these women face today with unequal rights and opportunities, such as not being able to hold same jobs as white males, women, or having a voice to stand up for what they believe in. They couldn't fight back in this sense. And additionally, I took out from our readings chapter 11 of the Scanlon readings, which addresses the March on Washington, in which Height was not granted a formal role or able to speak in the march, but she was one of the principal organizers of it to protest and advocate for American civil rights and economic rights. But all of these issues just show how, since the struggle for equality in pay and labor persists for the Black community, especially Black women, that Dorothy's advocacy work is just so necessary to continue paving the way towards equal treatment and opportunities for all people. And her work just really makes me realize how prevalent many of the issues that Dorothy fought for and all these other women that we've been covering through the readings, through our books, and everything we've talked about in class, just how the roots of slavery and mistreatment of Black women, especially in the Black community, need to be addressed and reformed today. Lastly, for my part, I wanted to end with a quote from Dorothy herself that I feel like ties together everything that I talked about really well. So she said, "We have to improve life, not just for those who have the most skills and those who know how to manipulate the system, but also for and with those who often have so much to give but never get the opportunity."
All right, so I'm just going to give a few closing remarks for our presentation. So we just wanted to say as a group that Dorothy Height is an example of a Black woman who, against all odds, became a public speaker and politician who was instrumental in fighting against both sexism, racism. She challenged convention by denying gender roles and finding joy in her career. She was the president of the National Council of Negro Women for 40 years, and she fought against both sexism and racism through policy and advocacy. She worked on countless other committees, working for not only the equality of Black women, but for the equality of all people, despite ability, race, and gender. She monumentally helped the civil rights movement by working for the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. Yet her intersectional identity of being both Black and a woman disvalues her when we look back at history. When it comes to our textbooks, she is still second to men like MLK or Malcolm X or John Lewis, and not to invalidate them, but Black women are constantly overlooked in our society. And Dorothy Height is the epitome of this. She is the example, This is the importance of this class, of all these presentations, of all the readings that we do and the podcasts and the lectures and the videos. We learn more and more about the Black women who have built our country. The dichotomy of the Black female identity furthers the oppression and invalidation of Black women. We should all work to look further than the textbook and dive deeper than the readings, because that is the only way that we will discover people that had so much impact on us and our country. This is where we're going to discover the people that we don't normally talk about, like the Audre Lordes, the Septima Clarks, the Marsha P. Johnsons, the Ella Bakers, and of course, the Dorothy Heights. Thank you for watching our presentation and have a great day.